Should we trust anyone? I met a person a couple months ago, and they had tattooed on their arm, "Trust no one." And 6 months ago, in a very low-income area of an urban center, a gentleman had on a t-shirt that said, "God forgives and forgets, but I do not." Those who have experienced tremendous pain in contact with someone else might recoil and say, "I trust nobody," upon which the response is they need to learn how to trust again. Some might go additional steps to say you need to learn who to trust and who not to trust. Or as per from Christian scriptures, how to winnow people, the good from the bad, so to speak. Others talk of good people versus bad people, good heart versus not a good heart, and so on. Yet on the other hand, Christian scriptures also say we have all sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. I am not a person to take things at face value, though, and so I always delve deeper. What do we make of all this? Well, I know a couple years ago I ran into some videos, watched them by Simon Sinek. I think he wrote, amongst other things, Know Your Why. He has talked of this topic some, and I put through here some of my own thoughts also. Now let's just say we're talking about a person a lot of people might say, yeah, is a bad person. Yet might they be very much a person to trust if you are in the same group, so to speak, that they are. For instance, not everybody might have regarded Al Capone as their best friend from the 1930s and his involvement with providing alcohol to people during the Prohibition through sometimes enforcement through vigorous means, shall we say. And yet, if you were on his team, he might trust you and you might trust him very much until you're kicked off the team. You know, too, Adolf Hitler was married. His wife might have trusted him very much, and he her. And he might have trusted most of his inner circle. In fact, for many years, one of Germany's top generals ever in World War II, General Rommel, trusted Hitler very much. And yet, toward the end, he pulled away from Hitler, and Hitler had him executed by poison. But Rommel saved, some say, at least 100,000 lives of soldiers by giving up his own life. So what is it then to learn to trust, some people say? Is there anything behind that phrase at all? Perhaps that's only part of the answer. We have to delve deeper. I don't claim to have all the answers in life. With certainty also, everything in my mind is subject to change. I might wake up tomorrow and find out that I'd been dreaming, making up this little ditty here right now. It just comes to mind, too. Former President Reagan had once said, it might have been to Gorbachev, trust but verify. I think there was a lot more than meets the eye to that phrase, of course, and we kind of get that. It might have been also Evie Pamperis, who once was a Secret Service agent and wrote the book Bulletproof, who said generally you don't want to call someone a liar. And at the same time, you look like a fool if you are too trusting. Kind of like that advertisement way back. Give it to Mikey, he'll eat anything. Or maybe he'll believe anything. There's also a psychologist / life coach with the credential of a PhD who said once that the only difference between him and all his clients or patients, however you wanted to call that, is that they are all naive. Does that mean then they were too trusting? What again do we mean by trust? And too trusting, or they don't trust anybody? We might even extend that then to say, oh, they're paranoid. They have trust issues. They think everybody's out to get them. Well, in a sense, if someone knocks on your door and is trying to sell you a $2,000 vacuum cleaner, they might be trying to get your wallet. And somebody might be trying to get your self-esteem by giving you a put-down. So we have to think here, don't we? Isn't that what Napoleon Hill said? Think and grow rich. Maybe if he had a few more years beyond what he had in life, he might have written yet another book that just said, think and grow. There's also the phrase that comes to mind now, blood is thicker than water. I'm not exactly sure where that came from and don't have the time to delve into it, but I think we trust family members, or at least some of them, more than some other people. Isn't that then when we get in elderly years especially and ill, we'd rather be helped, cared for as necessary by a family member rather than turning it over to someone else whom we really don't know, and they just don't have much of a vested interest compared to a family member once again. Let alone, too, family members are the only ones oftentimes where we know so much about them that if they do something to us that is quite egregious, we might spill the beans on them. Thus, we each have dirt on each other, so to speak. That might be tied in then to trust. Trust being that there's some kind of a compact here where I've got the dirt on you and you've got the dirt on me. And kind of reminds me then of mutually assured destruction concept. That if you hurt me, you're going to get smacked upside the head by me in return. Or as once again Mr. Reagan had said once, I believe, and others too, talk softly but carry a big stick. Whatever exactly that might mean. Another thought here. Sometimes we have to be, quote, the fool, the naive person, go out there, take the risk, get burned, as a data collecting thing, an experiment. Otherwise, how are you going to know anything if we sit in our cubicles of life, called the house, TV set, and that's about it? For some, more than others. Where are we going to get the data then to know anything? There's a man, for instance, who wrote a book, trying to remember the exact title, How to Extract Secrets from People. Patrick King, I believe, is the author. Maybe one way to extract the secrets of life is to trust someone, get burned, and then remember the details as best we can. That can be easier said than done, I think. Was it the philosopher Santayana, I think the name is, who said, those who forget the past are condemned to repeat it? And yet, there's hope, because I remember yet another person saying on a YouTube video that if you fail in life on a lesson, you're just going to have to go back to school and repeat it. Maybe that then is part of trusting and getting burned. That's a school lesson. Of course, some might call that, what are the red flags? Did you notice the red flags? Why didn't you notice them? Did you discount them? And so on. Well, it strikes me there are a few things to remember, or think of anyway. Is human nature all the same? Are we all basically the same? Christianity, for instance, touts that we are all sinners that have fallen short of the glory of God. But have some fallen far more than others? Are there Hitler sinners, and are there St. Francis of Assisi sinners? Are there Mother Teresa sinners and Stalin sinners? Etc., etc. Are there Pol Pot sinners and Albert Schweitzer sinners? Yet others talk of a dark side. Does everybody have a dark side, or only some people? If a dark side is what you might call a malicious bent, except toward those who, for a time, maybe up to your death, are your allies, be that a spouse, other immediate family members, certain people in your business profession, or other areas of life, maybe those you go to church with, or what have you. Things you most enjoy as per hobbies. Isn't the bottom line, too, in a way, okay, we're on the same team, but for how long? Are you going to be trustworthy to them and they to you until you are kicked off the team, basically? Could that happen? Yes, surely. And then what? Maybe they got the goods on you and they spill it. Who knows? If you try to spill back, they might have more lawyer power, come back with a libel and slander suit, and on it goes. So just to boil it down a little bit more, I like doing that. I had spent 4 years at a half-time level, starting age 41, studying only mathematics at Berea College, and at West Point studied electrical engineering, so I like to sometimes boil it down. But at any rate, if we could boil this down a little more, might we ask ourselves these things about trust? First, what team are they on and are we on as far as certain common goals? And certain life premises, shall we say, including certain denials or certain things we hold most dear, on the other hand. What are our most important goals and our most important fears? What is it we most avoid? So that might be one circle of trust, so to speak. Oh, by the way, that reminds me of Robert De Niro in a movie, The Fockers or some such. Circles of trust. So we might have one group we feel trustworthy of, or other groups we don't feel trustworthy of and align with or not, based on common goals. But isn't that a little subject to vagary here, depending on whether you're going to be on that team for life or not? I mean, even in sports, key players at the very top do switch from team to team for various reasons. Or maybe they just leave the whole sport after a while, and the same regarding professions or jobs or life in general, or religions, what have you. Now it seems to me then there's a different sort of trust, far more difficult to find an individual to be simpatico with. Maybe we can't pony it up ourselves to anyone else hardly. And that is finding somebody, quote unquote, trustworthy, not on the basis of some common goal, economically, safety-wise, hobby-wise, religion-wise, but what they call of the heart. And what do I mean in this instance? For instance, when we say so-and-so has a good heart, or they couldn't hurt a fly, or they don't have a mean bone in their body. Well, perhaps this means an orientation toward what I call, and some might call, empathy, but moreover, I think, a desire to see good for everybody. I think Albert Schweitzer, the physician once, who had been in Africa for many years, later won a Nobel Prize for his work there, had a strong reverence for life, all life. You might say, too, isn't it a strong reverence for people to want to see their self-esteem always built? Isn't it in our best interest to find at least some people to have in our lives who want the best for everybody, rather than what I call to exert displacement or revenge or dumping on certain people from what they experienced painfully in childhood and couldn't delve back into, optimally resolve, give forgiveness on, and so on. So if they want to get back at somebody and they can't get back at, say, a parent, they want to get back at someone else, maybe a number of people. Anyone not on their team, mostly. I think partly then that was Mr. Hitler, so to speak, Stalin, Pol Pot, as extreme examples. Yes, motivated sometimes by envy, but also by a desire to get back. Some say Hitler having been beat savagely by his father in childhood. So if you were on Hitler's team, or you were married to him, maybe that went all right for a while or more. But if you were not on his team, or you got kicked off the team, including Rommel getting kicked off the team, General Rommel, life could get quite interesting, couldn't it? I think the problem is Mr. Hitler had a very malicious streak there, or let's just call it a desire to displace from his childhood upon those not on his team, and look out if you got off his team, boy. So if we have some people in our lives, maybe even just one, isn't that what they call one true friend versus fair weather friends? Yeah, maybe the so-called trustworthy business partner is the fair weather friend, is the economic friend when everything's going right or well. But when everything goes to heck in a handbasket, well, they kind of disappear off the face of the earth. Maybe even, was it Peter from the Christian scriptures denying Jesus 3 times? When everything was peachy keen, they were on the same team. But when things weren't going so well, Jesus was off the team. And Peter wasn't exactly trustworthy then anymore, was he? You know, so sometimes people are called fools, naive, too trusting. Yeah, they get burned sometimes. You know, Abe Lincoln was rather this way, very trusting. He had at least one business partner, owning a general store, I seem to recall, and got taken to the cleaners, shall we say. And Lincoln had to make up every cent in expenses incurred that the other man ran off with, basically speaking. But Lincoln learned in time. Now, maybe not everyone can learn the lessons of life this way. Maybe there's too much marketing, so to speak, saying that everybody is equally trustworthy and has a great heart. So, you might say, too, a person with Down syndrome might not be the most intellectually gifted person in the world, might be conned by some people also, yes, like a child. And yet, you know, the person with Down syndrome might have not a mean bone in their body compared to many a person. So they might be one of our best friends when it comes to being trustworthy as to their desires, intentions toward everybody rather than some people. Isn't that why in Christian scriptures, again, it was touted the beauty of a child's heart, trying to remember the exact phraseology. I think the verse comes to mind something of the order of, blessed are the children, for they shall inherit the earth. The implication being perhaps a child might be less likely than someone older and jaded and facing the realities of how to make a living, provide for loved ones, and so on. A child might be less likely on average to be displacing upon some people and not others. One last point here. So if we're going to talk of trust, we might also talk of trust about data. Maybe someone quite trustworthy in the heart department, not a mean bone in their body, for instance, might not be very trustworthy as a data source. In other words, you might not want to hire them to work on your air conditioning or build your next home if you are going to have a next home built. You might not want them to repair your computer, and yet they might be very trustworthy if we're talking about matters of them not wanting to displace upon anybody. They're having the so-called not mean bone in their body. Whether or not, in fact, by the way, they are classified by some people as a fool or too trustworthy or a pushover, naive, what have you. Because in a way, a child is a fool compared to an adult, on average, and so is an infant. But don't we also like to be around such individuals from time to time? Not all the time, and not exclusively, but isn't a child a joy to be around? And isn't an infant a joy to be around? As long as the infant doesn't have colic, of course, and the child hasn't been feeling frightened. Now, of course, as if the child is quote-unquote spoiled and didn't get its 10th Xbox that year, well, all bets are off. But on average. So, maybe not all data is trustworthy. From anybody these days, of course. But yet, these are my thoughts then on trust. There's different aspects of trust, perhaps. Do we trust thus just anybody? And what do we mean by trust? Are we trusting someone because they're on the same team and they're trustworthy for certain things? Really? Or do we trust somebody on matters of the heart, but maybe they're not very good at winnowing character? Do we trust somebody with regard to data? Are they good at their, quote, trade? Seems there's different aspects then of trust. Something here to think of, I think. Subject to revision. I might not be very trustworthy on how accurate this is, but take it for what you will, of course.